Yes, hello, folks. Welcome to the weekly Manchester United podcast. I'm your host, as always, Phil Brown, joined with my regular co-host, the excellent James Rhodes. James, how you doing, mate?
Doing pretty well today, and you?
Not too bad on this Monday. Enjoying the rides just right down the streets from me in LA, which is regular occurrence these days. So, but I had a nice weekend, mate. How did you do anything nice?
It was just my son's last game that I was coached this weekend, which was a good one. He scored a goal with about 30 seconds left to win the game. That was fun, and the final game of the season, so that was a big one. He enjoyed that. He was very proud, as was I. But that was the highlight for sure.
I was reading the thing on Andy Mitten's Twitter saying about his daughter scoring and how she was
Mm.
too embarrassed to celebrate, and how he was almost on the field giving it this year to the other
Oh
parents and
yeah,
stuff, right?
that was me. I'm the coach, and I'm
Well,
sitting there trying to be composed, and I'm on the
no,
pitch, and I'm like,
honestly,
yeah.
there's been so many times where I've been close to doing that. I have to say, like, watching your own kids succeed is far greater than
Mm.
anything you felt
Oh
whenever
my god, man.
there's just something about it, like just other kids too, like, but watching your own kids score a goal or do something for the first time is the pre. I wonder how come my man and dad didn't feel that. They weren't sitting on the sidelines on a ball freezing Saturday afternoon in Belfast, getting rigor mortis, watching me score, going, "Oh, I scored. Oh, about 10."
My dad did, but he's
Different
he's a very
generation.
he's a very, like, what's the word for it? Reserved man. So he watched all my games. He was always there, which was nice, but never an ounce of emotion. So it was like, are you proud or not? I don't know.
Oh,
But
man, the
I
pride.
figured I want my son to know I'm proud when
I
he
know
does
I had
those
the
things.
waterboard, my dad.
Yeah.
Honestly, like,
Yeah.
James, I get picked by Coca Cola as a kid to go on the field at the niceness Windsor Park halftime,
Mm.
Northern Ireland playing Chile, right? And I got to go on the field and do all these ball skills. Petrified, right? Place
Yeah.
full of players, and we are full all the players, fans, TV. My dad didn't even go. I came back. He goes, my brother brought me back. He goes, well, what do you think? He goes, I don't know. What's Coronation Street? I can't imagine my kid
Mm.
getting selected for something like that and not showing up. It's just this generation.
Mm.
But
Gotta send our therapy bills up the line for
well, it's true,
generational trauma, you
mate.
know.
I was talking just quickly on this. Was talking about this with Stevie Nicol once, and he told me his father not once came to watch him playing
Mm.
for Liverpool at Anfield, and I could
Wow.
tell he was laughing, but deep down it
Yeah,
hurt a bit.
it hurts. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I laugh and joke about it, but to be honest, I can't imagine being, but it's just different generation. All right,
Yeah.
man, let's talk about, of course, right before we went on the air, Gyökeres, of course, announced by Sky Sports that United have made an approach for him through intermediaries. We'll talk about Mbumo. Been very little progress from what I can read on that. You might be able to enlighten me differently.
Sure.
And of course, number of other potential signings and outgoings. I want to talk a little bit about the Garnacho thing that I mentioned the other day on Twitter that I took a bit of heat for, which I want to clarify. And then, of course, Rasmus Hoyland, who has a disagreement with you over how long his contract is.
Apparently so.
Yeah, it's we hope you're all enjoying our two shows a week. Thursday we'll probably throw out some questions for
Yeah.
our listeners and start addressing those on our Thursday's podcast. So thanks to all of you for downloading and supporting the show. Um, let's talk about Gyökeres before, like we said before we went on air. It was announced that United have made an approach for him, which seemed likely. What do you know about that?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, as far as I know, this is one that's been building for quite a while here. Obviously, Ruben Amorim, uh, a big fan, and it goes both ways. You go back to April. There's quotes from Victor Gyökeres' agent saying, he's going to have a hard time staying at Sporting with Amorim
Mm,
gone because he joined Sporting for Ruben Amorim. He had 8 proposals and he joined for him. Obviously, he's become an incredible player at Sporting under Ruben Amorim and accomplished numbers that nobody's really done. Um, just have to make sure this guy behind me isn't levying that sharp object for me. No, sorry.
You
But if
better,
he
you better. I paid a lot of money for that.
no, but yeah, we'll just see. Make sure it doesn't come crashing through my window. Give me a warning if you see it. Um, but no, I mean, in general, just looking at it, he was a player that, as far as I understood it, and I think you've probably heard similar to me on this. Maybe you can say if you have or not. That there was a point towards the end of the season where Ruben Amorim was real frustrated with things when,
Yeah,
when he
you
was
could say.
talking about like leaving around that time, like before the Europa League final. And I think at that time, as far as I know, he made it pretty clear, you know, forget the budget options, forget these kinds of things, that the club needed to be really ambitious. And I think some of his comments were probably a bit of pressure for them, don't go for the cheap option. We can't afford to do this, this young thing. Let's get the best players. And it seems like, as far as I know, at that time there was contacts made for Gyökeres, and he was willing to join. And and Romano as well kind of said today at 2, if United had the finances from the Champions League
Yeah.
qualification, they'd probably be done already, this Yonkers thing. And I have to say that I think that's true. I think the only holdup here, as far as I've heard for the last week or two on this, is financial. Because with Cunha, with Mbumo, in progress now, they're going to need to sell a bit, to balance the books, or at least have sales lined up, you know what I mean, to balance the books, to make a deal for Gyökeres. But I would suggest it's the preference of United and his preference to come to United over the other options that are presenting themselves.
So why haven't there been progress on players going out? And
Mm,
second part of that question is, when Amorim was asked before the Europa League final, how pivotal was it that they win that competition in order to be able to recruit better in the summer? They said, look, we have a plan,
mm,
with or without, and if we don't qualify for Champions League, it's really only going to cost us one extra player.
yeah,
It would seem to me like Gyökeres was included in the must-haves. The central striker,
sure,
number 9, the one extra player would be a bonus player.
yeah.
So why now are we talking about maybe the fact that we didn't qualify for the Champions League being an impediment to this deal?
Well, just being a little careful on that point. Maybe it isn't, but at the same time, United, like, let's look at the reality of something here. They're in talks with Brentford right now
Yeah,
over Mbumo, right? You know well enough that it's not the best idea when you're negotiating over a
sure.
deal that has no release clause to be saying, "Oh, we're just going to go throw money at Sporting," for Gyökeres now. You know what I mean? And the thing that I would suggest on this is that this is the way I see it. Maybe it's a partially informed opinion, but this is the way I see it. Cunha was a release clause. He wanted to join United. There's no negotiations. You're doing it. You pay the 3 installments. It was pretty straightforward there. He wanted United. In Bumo, there's a lot of competition, right? That's
Yeah.
what we got last Monday, that Arsenal went for him, Tottenham went for him, Newcastle went for him. They all
Mm.
went in for him, and he was really even considering, so they had to make a quicker move on that deal, I think, to get him ahead, of these other clubs. If they waited around, if they went for Gyökeres first, let's say,
Yeah.
Mbuma might be gone. He might be off to Newcastle or to Spurs, with Thomas Frank likely going there. Like, yeah, that might have happened if they hadn't made a quick move there to get ahead of this and to push on it. Um, the other thing with Gyökeres' deal is that, as far as I know, and it has been reported, he pretty much has an agreement on a price to leave. So it's not a release clause, but it's almost a release clause, where it's like he has an agreement with Sporting where 55 million pounds or so comes in. It's over. It's done, right? So the negotiation is probably a little simpler there. So to me, it's maybe a little bit of like, you just getting the difficult deal, the one that's going to require a little more negotiation, a little more convincing. That's a little more, not urgent from a football standpoint, but urgent from
Well,
logistics maybe standpoint. In first is better, but that's just my view on it.
no, I couldn't disagree with that. I also think we have to be fair and accept that United's first target was Liam Delap at half the price.
Sure,
And
easier to do, yeah,
but what was
financially, yeah.
interesting, yeah, what was interesting to me, James, is I put a poll on social media
Mhm.
a while ago asking if who would be a preference between the two, Liam Delap and Gyökeres. Gyökeres came out, emphatically ahead in that. Now, we're talking about a guy that's about to turn 27. Is that correct?
Mhm. Yep.
27. Sporting have to sell him now.
Mhm.
And if all the other top clubs get their first choices, they aren't spoiled for choice in where he can go.
Mhm.
There aren't a lot of clubs that are capable of forking out 65 million,
Yep.
And as we've seen with people like Osman, you know, there are a few clubs outside of Europe that can afford to do it, but
Yep.
it's a big decision whether you want to do that in the prime of your career.
Yep.
This is a guy that is fitting the age profile of the players that United are signing. If you look at Cunha's age, Buemo's age,
26. Yeah.
Gyökeres' age, these are all players in their prime that are
Yep.
ready to hit the ground running right away, that you don't have to hope that they're going to fulfill certain. You have a good
Yeah.
idea of the peak of what these players are, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
They're players that would come in and improve United immediately.
Yep.
And look, by anyone's, reckoning, those three signings, Cunha, Buemo, Gyökeres, is that's a significant outlay, to be fair.
Yeah. It is. Yeah.
So you would imagine that after that, if United can get Gyökeres' deal done without selling, I think that's very, very encouraging. I think that's about as much as you could expect. But then there has to be a focus on getting players out.
For sure. For sure. Because look, I mean, at the end of the day, in a general sense, just those 3 players alone, you would consider a pretty damn good window,
Yeah.
probably one of the best that we've ever had, frankly. And you look at the quality and the outlay, it's not insignificant. These are, and again, you're not paying for kids, so you're not buying guys on 50,000 a week. Their wages are, they're not ridiculous, but they are significant. They're going to be starter quality wages in line with your other top players on, most of the players on your team. So it is a significant outlay. But yeah, getting the players out, it's probably I would suggest maybe that we need to have the idea at least of some players leaving for to get Gyökeres in after Mbumo. We would probably need to have some idea that some of these players are going to go. There's a little bit of get out of jail free cards here on the sales if it goes right. Presumably because specifically Marcus Rashford and Alejandro Garnacho being these, academy players, these players that have come through and have no amortization. That in one respect, we haven't had that, in many years past where we've been able to have where we've seen significant sales, and it's the reason why City and Chelsea have been able to just blow money left and right because they've had a lot of these academy sales, these zero amortization sales that are pure profit. And that's a little bit of the get out of jail free card. And there seemingly isn't a world where either of them return. I mean, you still have to sell them, obviously, but there doesn't seem to be any world where they're not moved on in some capacity this summer as of now.
Yeah, I don't see any way back for them. I think obviously Marcus Rashford's fee is at a level where most clubs, who are in the Champions League, top Champions League clubs, it's not beyond their reaches.
Yeah, yeah,
And he's at 27, and considering how the last few months went at Villa, his previous peaks of his career, he's worth 40 million.
yeah, for
Uh,
sure.
Garnacho, let me just elaborate a bit on Garnacho, James, because I brought up a point that when I read it back, I can understand why it might have not completely articulated the
Hmm.
point that I was making. When I said it was forgivable, what he had done, I didn't mean in the sense that it was forgivable for him to stay at United.
Right. Hmm.
For me, there's two different points I'm making here. One, Amorim is absolutely right, in my opinion, to not tolerate that.
Yeah.
Ronaldo couldn't get away with petulance. And I think that when you talk about changing culture, this is where you change it. You have to show this has a consequence at Manchester United. Manchester United is one of the biggest sporting institutions in the world. There's a reason why most people don't make it to this level.
Yeah.
And you have to behave a certain way. You can make mistakes, of course. That's life. But to be a Manchester United player, there are certain things you can and can't do. Now, what I'm saying is the things that he's done off the pitch shouldn't assassinate the kid's character. They're stupid. I'm not saying he doesn't, Amarim shouldn't deserve to move him on, but James, think about what life must be like for these kids. Imagine going from complete notoriety, to global notoriety, or complete anonymity to global notoriety overnight.
Yeah.
You're all of a sudden playing with Messi in the Argentina team. You're not making money you were never making before. You're in another country you're not familiar with, different culture, different language, everything being thrown at you. You can't have Christmases anymore. You miss birthdays. You miss out on everything. And the pressure is relentless. It's very, very difficult to be that consistent in life.
Yeah, it is. It is. I agree, and I worry about these types of things. Like I've spoken a few times about like the Kobe Mainu thing, where he's not like necessarily nailed down a place. And one of the things that I think is okay is like as fans and hopefully around United, I think so often we're kind of looking for somebody to be like a savior of the club, that you can push these kids too much too early too soon, um into Viva Ronaldo and all these things and the posing and all that. Like some of that worries me a bit because of what happens after that. Progression isn't linear for players either. But what can throw it is when players are starting to have that difficulty, or there's a point where the things are stalled a bit. You don't want the pressure to exceed, and you don't want the ego to exceed the ability at that point in time, and that can create problems. And so I look at like Kobe Mainu, and I keep saying, you get these discussions like, well, he's not starting, so he should leave. No, he's 20. Like we should be okay with a player who's 20 not being there yet, without making it about they're not talented, or they're not, the best player on earth yet, or they're not, it doesn't make them not special. It doesn't make them not a great talent. It doesn't make them any of those things. They can be that, and they can still just be 20. And it can be okay for a 20-year-old to be on the bench a lot. It can be okay for a 20-year-old to be in the team as a substitute or as a rotational player. It can be okay for a 20-year-old to not have their position on the pitch and everything fully nailed down, to complete a surety, and they can still become an amazing player. We've seen it with many, players that have gone through, that route of thing where it takes time, for them to get where they need to be. And I think that my hope as well, because it can push players, and I think this is I'm not blaming anybody but anybody else in terms of Garnacho, but it can push players to feeling like they're better than they are, or they deserve more than they have,
Yeah.
because it's so much admiration. I mean, Paul Scholes, under Fergie, he was a rotational player, 1,400 minutes, until he was 22. And he's one of
Yeah.
the best midfielders of all time. Like, let's just let it be.
If you look at Garnacho's minutes in comparison to, say, Ronaldo's at
Yeah.
that time, he's played significantly more football than most kids at that age have played.
Yep.
So I don't think he has any right to complain about his minutes. I don't think
Correct.
he's any
Yeah.
right to complain about, his treatment when he has played a lot this season. You know, he's I don't want to dig the kid out, but he's been very causal in
Yeah.
United's current predicament, yet
Yeah.
behaves like this is beneath him, that it's everyone else's fault. And this has been something that's been a problem at United for so long, is deferring and delegating responsibility for the position that you're in. Whatever the issues that are causing United to move Garnacho on will not be allowed to follow him at his new
Yeah.
club.
Yep.
We know there's been discussions, obviously, about some of the stuff his brother's done. His brother's a kid
Mhm.
too, right? But to me, that's something United could have got a hold of. United could have got their hands around that very, very easily. To me, it's a poor reflection on them that they couldn't even manage that. Like,
Yeah.
how difficult is it to go? I guarantee you, let's say Garnacho saying for Real Madrid, I guarantee you, if they wanted his brother to not post on social media,
Mhm.
his brother would not be posting on so
Mhm.
because one, Garnacho would have enough respect for the club, the institution, and that would be a commitment made contractually in negotiations that would be over in 10 seconds. Okay, in
Yeah.
order for you to say, yeah, bro, okay, where do I sign? Easy,
Yep.
right? If it's more important to Garnacho that him and his brother can post on social media than respect the football club he plays for, Then he's going to get kicked out of his next football club. And he
Yeah.
need only look, James, look at Jaden Sancho, look at
Yep.
Robert Morrison, Brandon Williams. Football is filled with young kids who got to this point but couldn't make. And Robert Morrison didn't get to this point. He had exceptional talent,
Yep.
didn't make the next jump. To be fair, there are a lot of variables that they're not in control of that determine whether the next step is made successfully. How did you grow up? Did you grow up in a home of physical abuse, sex abuse, drug abuse, alcohol abuse, whatever, poverty?
Hmm.
Because that builds imposter syndrome in kids. Can you
Yeah.
validate yourself? Do you trust yourself? Do you believe in yourself? When you're under pressure and you're faced, with competition at an elite level, do you believe you're good enough? That's the biggest reason why kids don't make it.
Yeah.
Once you get to a level where your talent has got to the point where you're being considered, you're good enough. What happens next is mental. And
Hmm. Yep.
and that's going to happen in every aspect of life, not just football. You're at home, you're a parent, you have kids, you're under pressure. What's your internal dialogue? Depends so much on the environment that you were raised in. And
Yep.
that's about whether you trust yourself to, be good enough and not have imposter. If you have imposter syndrome, that is a major impediment for any young kid or any human being at any level once they get put under pressure. Because once kids get to about 16, 17, 18, there's no more segregation. Every level of sport, you're segregated and placed against players your own age.
Yep.
Now, all of a
Yep.
sudden, that doesn't happen.
Yep.
And the jump is massive, but it's all
It's
mental.
huge. Yeah. Yep. Yeah.
And so
No,
you
I
have to
completely
realize,
agree.
there
Yeah.
we go.
No, go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I'm just saying, like, for a lot of people who are judging, they're usually young kids.
Yeah.
When you get older in life and you look back, as Soren Kierkegaard said, you can only understand, life must be lived forward, but it can only be understood in reverse. When you look back on your life, you can understand why a lot of things happened. But when
Yep.
you're in them, you can't. And so when you're young, this doesn't make sense. But when you're older and a father, it makes sense.
Yeah. Look, and I think it's just separating the things out. It is from the perspective of a Manchester United fan, it's
Yes,
what's
of course.
happened has happened. It's over. There's no reason. That's the reason why he's gone. That's why Ruben Amorim said he's leaving. So that's okay. The other aspect of it is just a different understanding of what may have led to that, and that's the same for every single player who's left a club, been kicked out, had this, that doesn't matter. There's always can be an understanding of what's happened behind the scenes. It doesn't change whether it's the right thing from the football club or not, but it's
Yeah.
there. It is
It's
there.
hard for
Those
me
things
to hate
happen.
James. It's hard for me
Yeah.
to have, like, I don't even hate Jadon Sancho. I just think he's done
No.
stupid shit,
Yeah.
right? That's not flattering.
Yep.
United haven't behaved perfectly either.
Yeah.
But I can't indulge that feeling of hatred or resentment. Like, you know, at the end of the day, stupid shit. But for me, I think about things I've done in my life,
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
stupid shit I posted on the internet, the stuff I look back on now, even posts from a year ago that make me cringe.
Yeah. I
You know,
know.
I'm filled
We've
with
all got it. We've all
and
got
I'm
it.
filled with human error, right? And getting up every day, doing everything right, that's hard. Anyway,
Hmm.
let me ask you about Rasmus because he has said, if we could move the conversation on Rasmus Højlund, we'll talk about. He has said he wants to stay,
Hmm. Hmm.
and does appear there's healthy interest in him from Italy.
Yep.
Allegedly, loan options with buy options and all that. Um, none of us are particularly comfortable with that, considering what happened with Sancho. But it would also seem to me a bit difficult for Højlund that if United send someone like Gyökeres, he's backup striker.
Backup, backup, backup too.
Yeah,
Because Cheeto Obi Martin is going to get more minutes next season. Joshua Xerxes, with the tens being signed, will also get more minutes next season. Who come really into favor. Rasmus Højlund won't really play next season. At the end of the day, um, he really won't if he were to stay at United. And this is always the decision that has to be made. Anybody wants to stay and fight for their place, and as well understand that. Despite the joking about him not understanding his contract length, which is a little amusing to me, because he didn't sign for Chelsea. We don't do 8-year contracts at Manchester United.
Was it a miscall?
besides,
Did he actually say it? Was
no,
it a
he said
miscall?
it. He said it in the interview. He said 2030. It's a maybe it's just after a game. I don't know. The heads, rattled, all of that. The thing about it that I think is problematic is like he just had an awful, awful game for Denmark. Like you watch the people who were Danish fans and the people who commenting on it, it was a truly horrific game. So, the level of his play is unfortunately moving beyond what we've seen at United to, because sometimes you see players they're struggling here, they get a different environment, it looks a bit better. They go to the international club, they feel better, they do better. I mean, we've seen with like Christian Eriksen, it's different speed, but he had a really rough appearances. But is it just an interview after that, I guess, or around that time? But he did say it. And I think the thing is that look, any player will generally say, before anything's done, there's still the basic media training of, oh, I've got a contract and I'm going to fight for my place and I'm going to stay and all that, and that's fine. I don't think that's going to happen in the real world, because the real world happens. Offers come in. His representatives and his people have also met with Inter. It wasn't like they shut down the talks of those things happening. Inter wouldn't be, specifically Inter, I say in this case, Inter wouldn't be approaching and speaking to United about an offer should the talks with his representatives have gone nowhere, where they said he's absolutely unwilling to join. From the Italian side, they've said plenty that he's shown an openness to joining the league. And he would be smart to do so, because regardless of what happens, this is your career at stake. If Inter want you that much, and you're going to play there, and it's a league that you're more familiar with, that you started in, that you've produced in, it's a smart move. And so just anyway, despite the joke over the difference in the contract length, I'm not really bothered by the comments, because I think it's just your basic, somewhat canned response, which is all you would expect the player to give, ahead of things happening. I've got a contract, I'm gonna play. I mean, people say that, and then the next day you know they're gone. It's like these things they are what they are. It's between the two clubs, and as well on the United side, if they do agree a deal with Inter to get something done here, they obviously will have conversations with Rasmus, and this is our position. You're not going to play next season if you're here. We need they have leverage on those kinds of deals, because end of the day, footballers want to play football. They're not usually happy to not play, regardless of the situation. Oh, so you Mike there, bud.
Sorry, mate. He can't have a situation in a year where he's sitting on the
No,
bench. He
that's
can't.
career. It can be
Yeah,
career ending. I
it
mean,
would be
it's really
devastating.
bad. Yeah,
His options at the end of this season, next season, if he has a year similar to the one he had and he's on the bench, would be significantly, would look significantly different than what he's looking at right now. So he's in a position where I think Amorim has to be straight with him. Amorim gets a striker. Look, it's better for you at the very least to go out on loan if we can't sell you. And I think for what you were saying at the start of this podcast, Amorim's frustration, he looked like a manager that had given up on
yeah,
expecting anything different from Haaland. He protected him in the media, which was interesting because he's had no problems digging out other people. But I think he was more subtle with Hoyland, where we don't score, we don't score, we don't score, we don't score. And if you're a striker
yeah,
hearing that in the press conference,
yeah,
that's directed at you. If
yeah,
you're saying we concede too many goals, we concede too many goals when you're a defender and a goalkeeper, that's aimed at you,
yeah,
right? Without it being aimed at you. So, this is it's no surprise to me that the first three signings, if you need to pick them all, are three forwards. And that's exactly what Manchester United need. They've also talked about needing a centre midfielder and a goalkeeper on top of another striker.
hmm.
Is that enough?
For now, I mean, look, I don't expect United can get every problem done this summer. Given where we've just finished, and given the necessity to, like we've talked about, building sustainable, a real solid core for the future. I think it's okay for now. I mean, there's one game a week. Is it enough if we were in the Champions League too? Probably not. I think you'd need another center back probably to come in,
Well,
maybe another left-sided, player, or a wing back, because we don't know, is Harry Amas going to be good
well,
enough? Is
Diego
Diego
Leon coming
Leon?
in.
Well,
Yeah,
we don't know, you know what I mean? Like, if you're in the Champions League, those
sure.
unknowns are, but if you're playing one game a week in the Premier League, you're probably okay. Dorgu's a tough kid too. He's got great work rate, great energy, great stamina. So you expect he's going to be fit for most of the season, if not all of it, and be able to play your 90 minutes you need. Um, so yeah, I think it's enough. I mean, I do. I think that the next after that, I'm looking at another midfielder once Casemiro departs, of course, and probably a center back because then Harry Maguire would be expected to depart the next summer as well. But for now, I think it's enough because the one thing you don't want to do is, I guess, one thing that you do need to do is when you've put all these pieces in place and you've got a preseason for your manager, you're going to have new assessments next season. Who's performing in the system? Who fits? Who's working? Who's if anybody's not working, you might change up your ideas, and you don't want to spend. It would be good to, I guess, leave yourself open to improvements that can be made if you're not 100% like these are the positions we have to recruit for, at this point. So I think it's enough given the context of things.
What type of midfielder do United need?
Mm. Well, it's a good question because it seems as though with Bruno Fernandes staying in the targeting of these three forwards, that Bruno will be in that midfield. And so, my suggestion, not my suggestion, but what I would say is really you need like another guy, essentially to a degree, a Casemiro replacement, right? Somebody who's in a similar vein to Ugarte, maybe better, maybe younger, maybe what have you, but a similar vein of cover ground, do a hell of a lot of defensive work, and help move the ball easily and be solid in
The,
possession. But
the, the reason why I'm asking that question is because Kobe Manu sticks in my mind.
right,
And do United need a midfielder? To me, United need a midfielder who's capable of sitting deep and who's
yeah,
better on the ball than a Ugarte,
sure, yeah,
right? Because that to me is, if I'm going to make one obvious improvement in the midfield, it's going to be a younger midfielder with legs who can sit deep
yeah,
and who's
yeah,
better on the ball than a Ugarte.
sure, yeah,
I
I would agree.
I remember when I saw Kobe Manu at Everton when he first came into the team, and how transformative he was immediately, where he would sit deep and ping balls into the channels immediately. And I felt, here we have this young player who's capable of sitting in that sixth position and is technically very, very good to the point where, he creates attacks from deep. United need to do that. Remember when Lissandro Martinez moved up into that sort of
Yeah,
defensive field position? United were almost transformed for a while. I mean, that win at City was because of Martinez's deep,
yeah,
quarterback role where he was
yeah,
sort of playing balls,
and
but he
Fulham
also had to do
too.
attack.
Around the same
Yes.
time, they had a win of yeah,
Yeah. So to me, that if I'm buying a midfielder, that's what I'm buying a midfielder
yeah.
for. But then I'm saying, okay, well, if that's not Kobe Manu's position, then what is?
Yeah, I think it's going to be behind Bruno, and that's why I say I think him and Bruno are probably a similar ilk for Ben Emram. They're not the same player, but what I mean by that is they're both players I think who are gonna. And he did this at Sporting a lot, and he's done this before. You want those guys who flex between that midfield and the forward because in this system, right? Those tens, they're not like sitting on the touchline, right? They're in the center of the pitch playing. That's one of the reasons Garnacho kind of struggled with it too, is it's not very natural for him to sit in narrow. But they're sitting in narrow, they're coming to the midfield, they're picking up the ball, they're progressing it. And really there's not a massive difference between that more attacking midfielder in the of the two and the tens. They're kind of in the same spots very often, which is, so I feel like for me, from my perspective, that Kobe and Bruno are kind of two of the same there. They can play there, they can play up at the tens, and so there'll be space for both. Cunha takes a game off, Bruno moves up, Menu plays deeper, or vice versa.
Mm.
And that's how I see it, and I think that's the best way for Kobe to develop his game a bit more because that's where I see him best is in the middle of the pitch, under pressure where there's defenders around, being able to dribble, to evade, to keep the ball moving and get it up the pitch. So that's in my mind where I think he could be best. And in the long term, Bruno staying, it's great. He is older. There is a point here that
Yeah.
will come that he's going to have to rest and we're going to have to rotate him and he cannot play 90 minutes in every competition, every game, every week, and that we need like a serious long-term future beyond Bruno either way. And I think Kobe Mainoo's probably that guy for me. They're different skill sets, but I think in essence it can be that guy for me.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think you have to be forward thinking about how you transition, and
Yeah,
make sure that your progression planning, isn't okay. Bruno leaves now. Let's bring somebody else in, and then
yeah,
try. I mean, United tried that a bit. To be fair, with Van de Beek, we may laugh, but I think that one of the reasons
yes,
why they brought him in was because I think they wanted
you're not wrong. Yeah,
I think they felt that Pogba and stuff was going to leave, and they wanted to bring
yeah,
in other players that with a vision and bring them in where they would be ready to start in a year. Um, then it turns your attention to goalkeeper. Like, to me, if you can bring in someone better than Onana,
mm,
different goalkeeper, you do it because one of the things Onana has to do, James, is get the confidence of his back four or
yep,
back three, whatever it is, and he doesn't have it.
hmm,
And this is similar to me in the Hoyland situation in a way where once people give up on you, you could see the players were not passing the ball to Hoyland.
yeah, yeah,
And anyone who's played football knows this happens at all levels. I was watching some of the goals that United conceded the other day um, and looking at United players' body language towards Onana,
yeah,
which was almost contemptuous,
yeah, yeah.
right? And once you get to that stage, it's unforgiving and
Mm.
it's demoralizing. And I do think that's something that Amorim has to address. But finding a good goalkeeper today, how do you find him?
Yeah, it's tough. It is tough, and as well, again, Onana, decent sized wages, a lot of money left owed on him. Just the financials of replacing is hard enough as it is. And I think that realistically, because you look at the options that are out there, there was some talk like of Donnarumma. Um, I think a great goalkeeper, but you're going to be paying so much money. I just don't even
Mm.
think it's possible this summer to do it with the other things you need. And so you think, okay, well, maybe it is, if you're going to go that, you probably wait until next year. And you're also not in Europe and he's just won the Champions League. And you're probably not in a position to bring in a player like that where that's a better keeper. That's big 6'8", makes, is going to cover the posts a lot better than he is, And so then you're looking at, maybe you go younger. And then they've obviously been looking in that route of more, prospective keepers. And then you're just going to have to bet on your scouts and your analysts that they're getting the guy who's better or will be better, But yeah, the keeper position is, because they all, I mean, even Donnarumma, I think he's a really good keeper. I think he's a lot better. He's made plenty of errors and that I've seen. I mean, I do remember his
Oh yeah,
mistake against Madrid when Pochettino was over there, but 3 years ago now, that pretty much cost them that knockout round, So keepers make errors these days. It's so hard to find ones that are like every week
yeah.
you bet
No,
on them in and out. It's like, but it's minimizing those errors and maximizing the good moments at the same time. The keepers in the Barcelona and Inter games were incredible. That kept at times both teams into it. Summer kept them in it at that point in time. So it's a challenge. I don't know the right answer here, but I suspect it would be a lot easier for them to go for somebody younger, a lot more plausible to go for somebody younger than somebody, expensive and older that, I mean, Martinez, he gets a red card in the final day against United with a horrible challenge on Hoyland. So it's like, do you spend a lot
you,
of
you
money
don't
for
you
a
don't
keeper
because
who's
that's the name that's been linked.
yeah.
I would swap Onana for Emma
Oh,
Martinez
sure, me
right
too.
now.
Me too. I
But,
don't
but
get me
that's
wrong, I
that's
would, but
Buemo and Cunha are not Galacticos. They improve
yeah,
United right away. I mean,
yeah.
Martinez would improve United right away.
I think so too, but I guess the only thing I think there is I'm not sure how much it improves for the
Mhm.
potential cost. Like when you look at the difference between what we've had to Cunha and Mbumo, it's like huge. I'm not sure. I mean, Martinez is better. Don't get me wrong, but he is mistake prone too, and he's made I think some of the most errors in the league as well as Onana in leading to goals in the last season. So I think it's a marginal improvement, but it could be a massive outlay in terms of cost and
Mm.
wages. I don't think that's necessarily worth it. I think in that sense, that marginal improvement is maybe not worth the money to go in
Yeah,
for a
that's
younger
fair.
keeper for cheaper that may be a
Yeah.
much better improvement in the long term.
And that's a different. That's obviously the more sensible
Yeah.
answer. Like, yes,
Yeah.
and Martinez would improve United right away, but that doesn't mean that you should sign him. There's someone that
Right.
should improve
Yes.
United a lot right away.
Yes. Yeah.
That
Yeah.
United should be going for. At I think you need someone, to be honest, for the long term that you can trust,
Yeah.
that is used to. This is where you have to have grew up in a culture that football, where the physicality aspect of it.
Mm.
This is why Scandinavians tend to do well in England in that particular position.
Yes.
You know, if you have a culture that's more technical, that doesn't tolerate as much physicality, like you see in
Or
that
it's
league
slow.
where
Yeah.
it's more technical,
Yeah.
doesn't even in Holland, more technical. These are places Onana's done very, very well in. Like, don't get me wrong, African footballers, they're as tough as any footballer in the world.
Yeah.
They're tough lads, but it's about how your skill set develops in the culture that you're raised in. And if you're raised in a culture where there's very little contact on a goalkeeper, they're gonna. I mean, you see it with Bandier too. They're
Mhm.
uncomfortable with physicality, and I can go through lots of goalkeepers that are uncomfortable with physicality because they weren't raised in that particular football and culture. I think the British football and culture, Scandinavian culture, now it's changing a lot. To be fair, um, it's similar in the sense that there's a physical element to it, and they're used to dealing with that type of demands in your game and your skill set. So I think that for United, you need someone that maybe is Premier League experienced, that understands how to. Like, when you look at De Gea when he first came to United,
Yes.
this was by far his biggest weakness. He was poor on crosses, couldn't deal with the physicality, and it was obvious. And I still think that's something you need to focus on and get a goalkeeper that has the physical attributes
Yep.
to deal with the demands. I mean, we're talking about so many United players not having the physicality to be able to play in the Premier League. So this isn't just as a goalkeeper, but I
Yeah.
think in
Yeah.
that position, it's something United should be prioritizing.
100%.
Before you go, let me ask you about Osman, mate, because he, of course, has turned down a move to Al Hilal. Any potential that he could be an alternative, an affordable alternative to Gyökeres?
I would love to say yes, and I wish like I could feel any confidence in it. I mean, it's like what it can say for sure is it's 100% that United think he's a great striker. And if he was attainable, he probably
Yeah,
would
they
be
went from two
top of
years
the
ago.
list. Yeah, like they like him. He's great. He's a wonderful player. Everybody would want to sign him. But, you know,
Why is he turning those
it's
offers down, James? He has to have
I
something in
don't
his head that
know.
feels like there's a, and I don't think it's to stay at Galatasaray, and I'm certain it's not to stay at Napoli. If he's turning those offers down, it's because he's confident he's got a better alternative.
It must be, right? I guess I just don't know, you know what I mean? Like I don't know. I wish I could feel confident in it too, because logically that makes sense. But at the same time, he turned down offers from Chelsea to join them that are supposedly, his boyhood club, last year, and ended up on the final day with that like kind of emergency loan to Galatasaray. And he knew that was the only alternative at the time, I would presume, if they
Napoli
didn't
must be livid.
agree. So, like, what is going on? Is he just running it down? Is he trying to get Napoli to cancel his contract or something so that he can go somewhere for free? Because then you don't have to pay. I just don't know. I mean, that's a really tough sell, right? But at the same time, Napoli must be thinking we're never getting a fee for this guy. So what if we just agree to we just end everything? I don't know. I can only speculate on this because it's so bizarre. It's like 1 minute to the next. He's close to Al Hilal. He's not going to Al Hilal. He's close to Galatasaray. He's not going. But it's been like this for 2 years now, and I don't understand it. And it seems like it's just I don't understand the dynamics of what make it so complicated. But those dynamics make me not feel like there's any hope in hell that United would would want to
Mm.
would want to engage in it because it's just so complex. Do you get all the way with a deal and then at the last minute it's out again? And where are you going? How much do you actually have to offer? I genuinely have no clue. I can understand why they'd want to avoid this in that sense. You know what I mean? But who knows? I mean, if
Yeah, I
Yokeres goes
mean,
somewhere else, and just if
all
you know.
all things being equal, James, I'd take Osman over Joao
Oh,
Carez. I would.
I'd take him over anybody myself
Mm,
from a player perspective for
definitely
sure.
would. Definitely think he'd be
Yeah.
exceptional at United. And
Yep.
I think he is someone that, if they have the opportunity to sign, and all things being equal, that's someone they should definitely pursue. Lastly, will the Bumo fee, whatever, I'm not 100% sure how to pronounce the gentleman's name correctly, so my sincere apologies because I've heard both pronunciations for
He
the
pronounces it
Buemo and
like
Bumo.
Imbumo. Yeah.
Bumo, I want to
Yeah.
be respectful and get his name
Yep.
correctly, pronounced correctly. So in Bumo, the fee, some discussions about what it should be. I think 45 million plus 10 is about right. Um, I quoted the fee that PSG had paid for Kvaratskhelia, which was
Yes.
59 million pounds, 72 million euros in January. I don't think Brentford can be asking more than that, in my opinion. I think in today's market, that's still a very good price for a player. There's Thomas Frank about to go to Spurs. I don't really think that's a threat to the
No.
to the transfer. Um, just because Thomas Frank's going to Spurs doesn't mean that Boomer will follow him. So what do we think here, Brian? Or what do we think here, James? What do we think we'll get this feed on?
I think we will. And yeah, look, I mean, the other factor in this is it's not like Thomas Frank wouldn't have known Spurs were coming for him for a few weeks now. And so, these things maybe on the outside look quieter, but they held talks with Thomas Frank for weeks now. So I'm sure that within Brentford, within the players, they already knew, these kinds of things were happening. It's not like it's some shock that Thomas Frank's suddenly going to Spurs. It's been a kind of an open secret for a bit that he was likely going to end up there soon, after Postecoglou would go. I do think we'll get it done. There's been active discussions that have continued. I know that they're talking about it. I mean, it's the intention of all parties to get a deal done. And I think the biggest driving factor in this is that, I think United have made it pretty clear to Brentford, we're not going to get rinsed for this because the player doesn't want to go anywhere else, and you got to sell him, and he's only got a year left. And let's be real here. And so I do think it'll get done. I don't know, if it's changed in the last, I know that there's very like present and current discussions over it. And I can only suggest that's a good thing because it would seem to be. But I do know that, from United's perspective, they're not going to be doing that thing, the bid, go back, go
Mhm.
bid back and forth, and just let Brentford just keep driving the fee up. They're going to look at this and say, all right, we've had all these talks and things. We put this bid in. If it's not accepted, could they walk? Sure. I think it will be accepted. I think it'll get done. But I do think that's the position that they're trying to establish in the market as well, too, you know, as opposed to previous years where we're not going to do the Antonys, the Hoyland deals, these things, even Lissandro, where we go in at a price and it just you just keep rejecting and it keeps going up into the stratosphere because we have no other options. So I'm not particularly worried about it. I think it's a really, really high chance it gets done. Uh, but yeah, they're not going to sit there letting them drive it up to 70 million or something either. That's not going to happen. They won't
Um,
pay that kind of fee.
Possibly a little bit of a boost with getting some money from a sell-on fee from Anthony Elanga as Newcastle turn to Mr. Elanga
Right.
to get
Yeah.
that deal done. So
Yep.
congratulations, well done to United on finally having some acumen and including those sell-on fees, which
Yes.
has been a relatively recent phenomenon. So good
Yeah.
for them. But
Alvaro Fernandez too still expected, but I think after the Club World Cup to get some money from Madrid on that side of it too. Yeah.
all right, matey, we'll go ahead and leave it there. We'll be back this week, later on this week, with another podcast. We'll put
Sounds good.
some tweets out there and get some questions for you. We'll answer them in the final segment or whatever on the show later on in the week. So thanks to all of you for downloading the pod. I hope you're all having a nice summer. I hope you all enjoyed the Nations League over the weekend or whatever it was you were watching. Some interesting football. We'll be back again later on in the week. Take it easy, matey.
Sounds good. See you later.
See you, Matt. Bye.